Warning, this review may contain spoilers. Let me just start out by saying I can't believe I'm reviewing a new ToeJam and Earl game. It feels like a dream. ToeJam and Earl has been one of my favorite game series of all time since I first played it as a kid in the early 90s. The gameplay still holds up to this day, and I still have many fond memories of playing it with my friends when I was little and even in recent years. I actually really enjoyed both of the sequels even, Panic on Funkatron and ToeJam and Earl 3, which were both amazing games also, but due to publisher intervention weren't exactly the sequels the creators always intended to make. Back in the groove, after having a successful backing on Kickstarter, making $100,000 past its initial $400,000 goal, set out to do just that. The successful funding on Kickstarter finally gave game creator Greg Johnson and his team the creative freedom to make a sequel that played more like the classic game that came out almost 3 decades ago. So let's jump into the gameplay. The first thing I noticed booting up the game is how beautifully done the art style and menus are. Everything perfectly retains the feel of the original games even so many years later, and it makes you feel like you were sucked right back into the 90s. I was really happy that due to the game reaching one of its stretch goals, you're able to play as classic ToeJam and Earl and also a few other characters that were seen in previous games. I specifically was really stoked for Peebo and Lawanda, and especially Geek Jam. I love that character. Immediately when jumping into gameplay, the game just felt right movement-wise and feels very close to the original. I noticed very soon that you move much faster in water, which feels a bit weird at first, but a welcome change after getting used to it. The game feels so close to the original, in fact, that some of the sound effects were sort of throwing me off at the beginning because I was expecting to hear the classic ones, but I got used to it pretty quickly, and was also pleased to hear that for certain things they did use some of the classic sound effects, or at least in some cases tried hard to match them or pay homage to them. And speaking of sound design, I have to say, this game has a killer freaking soundtrack. You know what, just give it a listen for yourself. Just might hurt. During gameplay, the art style is absolutely beautiful to look at, and has a nice, colorful, whimsical feel to it which retains the feel of the Genesis classic, but it also achieves a unique style on its own. While I really enjoy the art style of everything, the paper cutout look had to grow on me a little bit, but I found myself really enjoying it after a couple playthroughs. I'm really glad that as someone who is a really big fan of the second game, Panic on Funkatron, that they were able to successfully implement some of the mechanics from that game into Back in the Groove. Like the Hyper Funk Zone, or shaking trees and bushes to find goodies, or bowling balls, and those weird parking meter things that can lead to either disappointment or a nice surprise. I'm also really happy that they included the rhythm games. As a drummer, they're fun and much appreciated, and you get to see some familiar Funkatronians. The game also pays homage to some of the elements from the third game, such as catching elves for presents, and the Medusa baby that randomizes presents. And speaking of presents, some of them are also carried over from the third game. Some of the new Earthlings are also an absolute crack-up, like the fan that chases you around.
Oh my gosh, I'm your biggest fan!
And Gandhi, which as long as you're in close proximity to him, you can't be hurt. I also have to mention the dolphin that took me a while to discover that replenishes your air when underwater. Its face is absolutely hilarious. And also the elevator that eats you and takes you down a level was totally one of those things I feel like could have come straight out of my childhood brain when dreaming of a sequel when I was little. There are plenty of more new additions as well, but I'll let whoever hasn't played the game yet discover them for yourselves. The level up system once you get a promotion is also a nice touch and adds a fun new dynamic to the game. As with the original, co-op is an absolute blast, and the levels feel just the right amount of difficult towards the end of the game. They'll have you on the edge of your seat just like back in the day. I also had a ton of fun with online co-op, and even had someone that I was playing with show me a secret I didn't know was in the game. I'm not going to spoil what it was, but let me just say make sure you explore Funkatron thoroughly at the end when you get there. Speaking of secrets, the game pays homage to the original, adding level 0 into the mix, which is awesome, and once you get there, there's even more to do than in the classic game. I personally thought it'd be funny if they put the entrance to level 0 in the top left this time instead, and the other secret island with the presents in the bottom right just to mess with the player, but hey, I can't complain. As you can see, there's a ton to love about this game, and it's so close to perfect. There are just a couple of issues, though, that I think are holding the game back a little bit. The two main things I'd like to see updates to are map size and tile size. It feels a bit too easy to find things in the game compared to the original. If you compare the size of the original maps with the maps in Back to the Groove, the originals almost always come out on top in terms of scope. To add to this issue even more, there are not as many tiles on the screen to uncover like in the original, which also dumbs down exploration. I found myself often disappointed with how quickly I found the ship piece and the elevator sometimes. And if they just just updated these two things, the game would be pretty much perfect. Putting these gripes aside, I'd still award the game a solid 9 out of 10. It's an absolute blast, and I highly recommend anyone to pick it up. Thank you guys for watching, and I still can't believe I just reviewed a new freaking ToeJam Earl game after all these years. See you later.